The laughter came right after she said it. Soft, private. The kind of laugh two people share when they think no one else understands the joke. My future mother-in-law leaned toward my fiancé across the dinner table and spoke quietly in Italian. I watched the words move across her lips like a secret. Then my fiancé smiled. Not politely, not awkwardly, not awkwardly. The way people smile when they agree with something. For a moment, the entire table continued eating like nothing had happened. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Someone poured more wine. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary drifted through the room. No one looked at me, because everyone assumed I hadn't understood a single word. Have you ever realized you were the only person in the room who knew the truth? I kept smiling, finished my wine, and waited, because when the dinner finally ended, I gently took my future mother-in-law's hand, looked her directly in the eyes, and answered her. In perfect Italian. The message appeared on my fiancé's phone while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. The screen simply lit up on the nightstand beside me, bright against the dim bedroom lamp. My mother is inviting you to dinner tomorrow night. The sender was Marco, my fiancé. I picked up the phone only to silence the notification, but another message appeared immediately after. She says it will be a nice surprise before the wedding. A surprise. That word sat strangely with me. We had already planned a quiet evening before the ceremony. Nothing complicated. Just rest, a movie, maybe some takeout. Now suddenly there was a dinner party. I set the phone back down carefully. Marco stepped out of the bathroom a moment later, drying his hair with a towel. Everything okay? He asked. Yes, I said. He glanced at the phone. Oh, he said casually. My mom wants to host a little dinner tomorrow. Tomorrow? I asked. The night before the wedding. Yeah, he said with a small shrug. Just family. Have you ever noticed when someone says something casually but their eyes avoid yours? Marco's family was traditional, his mother especially, akin, polished, and always watching. From the very beginning, she had studied me like a detail she couldn't quite place. At holidays, she would smile politely, but her compliments always came with something hidden inside them. You speak English so well. You're very confident. You must have worked very hard to come this far. Little comments, small things, easy to ignore, so I nodded. Dinner sounds nice, I said. Marco smiled, relieved. I knew you'd be okay with it. Later that night, while he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not fear. Not exactly suspicion, just a quiet awareness, like the moment before you realize a story is about to change. And somehow, I had the feeling tomorrow night would reveal something I hadn't fully seen yet. The dinner was held at Marco's parents' house just outside the city. It was the kind of home that always looked like it belonged in a magazine. Polished stone floors, long windows overlooking a quiet garden, everything arranged perfectly, as if someone had carefully rehearsed every detail. His mother greeted us at the door wearing a soft cream dress and a smile that felt warm but measured. Welcome, she said, kissing Marco on both cheeks before turning to me. And you look lovely tonight. Her eyes lingered on me just a second longer than necessary. Inside, the dining room was already prepared. Candles flickered gently across a long table set with delicate plates and silver cutlery. The smell of fresh basil and tomato sauce drifted from the kitchen. His father sat at the head of the table, reading something on his tablet. He looked up and nodded politely. Good evening. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but sometimes the smallest moments carry the loudest signals. As we sat down, Marco's mother poured wine for everyone. Tomorrow will be such a beautiful day, she said. A wedding is always a celebration of family. Family. The word landed softly between us. Have you ever heard someone use a word that sounded warm but somehow felt like a test? Dinner moved slowly. Pasta, wine, light conversation. Marco talked about work. His father discussed travel plans. His mother asked me polite questions about my job and my parents. Nothing unusual. Yet something about the way she watched me never quite changed. At one point, Marco left the table briefly to answer a phone call. His mother leaned slightly toward her husband and said something quietly in Italian. He responded with a short laugh. Then she looked at me again, smiling politely, as if waiting for something, maybe a reaction, maybe confirmation. But I simply lifted my glass and took a sip of wine, because there was one small detail. No one at this table knew about me, something Marco's mother clearly believed. She thought I didn't understand Italian, and I let her believe it, for now. Marco returned to the table a few minutes later. His chair scraped softly against the floor as he sat down beside me again, apologizing for the interruption. Work never stops, he said lightly. His mother smiled at him with quiet approval. The conversation resumed. But something about the atmosphere had shifted. Subtle, barely noticeable. Like a room that suddenly feels colder even though no one touched the thermostat. Have you ever sensed that people were speaking around you instead of with you? Marco's mother asked me a few polite questions about the wedding plans. The flowers. The seating chart. The honeymoon. Each question was wrapped in kindness, but underneath it there was a careful distance, as if she was measuring something. At one point she said, Marco has always had a very clear future ahead of him. I nodded. He's worked hard for it, I replied. She smiled again. Yes, our family values ambition. Our family, not yours. The sentence was gentle, but the boundary was clear. Dinner continued. More wine, more conversation. But the small comments kept coming. Not obvious enough to confront, just subtle enough to ignore, or pretend to ignore. Then, near the end of the meal, Marco's father stood to refill everyone's glasses. His mother leaned toward Marco, closer than before, and this time she spoke clearly in Italian. Spero che dopo il matrimonio lei impari il suo posto. I felt the words hit the air like a quiet blade. I hope after the wedding she learns her place. Marco gave a short laugh. A quiet one, not cruel, not loud, but enough. Enough to tell me he understood exactly what she meant. Have you ever heard something that changed everything in a single sentence? My chest tightened slightly, but I didn't react, didn't look up, didn't even pause with my fork, because if there is one thing I've learned in life, it's that the truth reveals itself best when people believe you cannot hear it. And his mother still believed that. Dessert arrived a few minutes later. Tiramisu. Marco's mother placed the plates in front of us with careful elegance, the soft scent of espresso and cocoa rising from the table. Family recipe, she said proudly. Everyone smiled. The conversation returned to safer topics. Travel plans. Wedding guests. A cousin who might arrive late from Milan. On the surface it looked like a perfectly normal dinner. But inside me something had quietly shifted. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly saw people clearly for the first time? Not because they revealed something new, but because you finally stopped ignoring what had always been there. Marco laughed easily with his parents, comfortable, relaxed, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if the sentence spoken in Italian had simply dissolved into the air. I studied his face for a moment, the man I was supposed to marry tomorrow, the man who had promised partnership, respect. A shared life. Yet somehow he had laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just easily. Like it didn't matter. I took a slow breath and set my fork down. The candlelight flickered softly across the table. Outside the windows the garden had grown dark, a quiet hum of insects filling the silence between conversations. Marco's mother lifted her wine glass. To tomorrow, she said. Everyone followed. To tomorrow. Glasses touched gently. A delicate sound. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marco's mother leaned toward him again. Another sentence in Italian. Soft. Quick. Confident. Vedrai lei cambierà dopo il matrimonio. You'll see she'll change after the wedding. Marco smirked slightly, and this time he answered her. Also in Italian. Speriamo? Let's hope. The room went quiet in my mind. Not the outside noise. The inside. That deep stillness when something becomes undeniable. I wiped my hands with the napkin slowly, because suddenly I understood something very important. They believed I didn't understand a word, which meant they had no idea what was about to happen next. Dinner ended slowly. Chairs moved back from the table. Plates were cleared. Marco's father stepped into the kitchen to help with the dishes while soft music played somewhere in the background, the kind of quiet ending that follows a long evening. Marco stood near the window scrolling through something on his phone. His mother walked me toward the front hallway, polite, graceful, every movement controlled. The marble floor beneath our feet reflected the warm light from the chandelier above us. At the door she paused and smiled. I am very happy Marco chose someone ambitious, she said gently. The word carried the same soft weight as earlier. Ambitious. Different. Not quite one of us. Have you ever heard a compliment that somehow felt like an insult? I smiled back. Thank you for dinner. I replied. Behind us, Marco approached, grabbing his coat. Ready? He asked. I nodded. But before reaching for the door handle, I turned slightly toward his mother. Then I did something simple. I reached out and took her hand, lightly, the way family members often do when saying goodbye. Her fingers stiffened slightly in surprise. And then, still smiling, I spoke. In Italian. Signora, ho capito ogni parola che ha detto questa sera. Mrs. A, I understood every word you said tonight. The silence was immediate. Marco froze beside me. His mother's face went completely still. For a moment, the house itself seemed to stop breathing. I continued calmly. E forse dovreste ricordare una cosa molto importante. And perhaps you should remember one very important thing. Marco stared at me now, his expression shifting from confusion to something closer to disbelief. His mother slowly pulled her hand back. I met her eyes directly, still smiling. Because sometimes the most powerful moment isn't anger, it's clarity. And in that moment, they finally understood that the quiet girl they thought they could control had been listening the entire time. For a moment, no one spoke. Marco looked at me as if he had never seen me before. "Do you speak Italian?" he finally asked. His voice sounded smaller now. Careful. I nodded. Fluently. The word hung in the air between us. Marco's mother stood completely still near the doorway, her confident posture suddenly gone. Have you ever watched someone realize their advantage has disappeared? It's quiet. Almost subtle. But impossible to miss. Marco rubbed the back of his neck, clearly searching for something to say. You should have told me, he muttered. I tilted my head slightly. Should I have? The question made him pause. Because the truth was simple. He had never asked. And his mother had simply assumed. I reached for my coat calmly. The same calm I had felt slowly building inside me since the moment she spoke those words at the dinner table. You said you hoped I'd learn my place after the wedding, I continued quietly, still in Italian. His mother's eyes widened again. Non preoccupati. Ho, imparato molto stasera. Don't worry, I already learned a lot tonight. Marco shifted uncomfortably. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. Maybe. Maybe not. Have you ever noticed how quickly people minimize something once they realize they were wrong? I opened the front door. Cool night air drifted inside the house. Then I turned back one last time. Tomorrow's wedding, I said softly. I think we should cancel it. The words were simple, but they landed like something final. Because the truth was clear now. And some truths make the future impossible. The silence after those words felt almost unreal. Marco blinked at me as if he was trying to process what I had just said. Cancel it? He repeated. His voice carried a nervous laugh, like he expected me to smile and say I was joking. But I didn't. The hallway lights reflected softly off the marble floor as I stepped outside. Cool night air filled my lungs. For the first time all evening, everything felt calm. Behind me, Marco followed quickly. Wait, he said, you're serious? I turned to face him. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated now. You're ending everything because of one comment? One comment. Have you ever noticed how people shrink a moment when they realize it exposed something bigger? I shook my head gently. No, I said. I'm ending it because of what the comment revealed. Marco looked confused. So I explained. Your mother didn't just insult me, I said quietly. She assumed I didn't belong. And you laughed. The words hung between us. Marco opened his mouth and closed it again. Inside the house, his mother stood near the doorway, watching us silently. I glanced at her once more, then back at Marco. You hoped I'd change after the wedding, I said. But the truth is tonight changed me. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just clearly. I understood something important. Marriage isn't only about love. It's about respect, and respect should never require translation. I walked toward my car slowly. Marco didn't follow this time. He just stood there in the driveway staring. Maybe he was thinking about tomorrow. About the wedding guests. The venue. The life we had been planning. But those plans had already quietly ended the moment his mother spoke that sentence in Italian. And the moment he laughed, I opened the car door and paused. Because sometimes the strongest decisions don't feel dramatic at all. They simply feel right. And as I drove away that night, I realized something. They had expected me to learn my place. But instead, I had learned my worth. What would you have done in that moment? Comment below.